let me say good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back. Nathan Ivy with you. And as always, I am not alone. Joined with the crew this afternoon. We've got Tarris Horton with us. What's up, Tarris? How
How
you doing,
you doing,
bro?
man? Good. How are you?
Got Phil Heimlich. What up, brother Phil? How you doing?
We
AKA
never want
Sexy
you. We
Phil.
never want you to be alone. We're always going to be there for you.
You know what I want? I want Sexy Phil t-shirts. That's what I want, man. Where's that merch at, bro?
I
Work on
am
that.
not going to live that down. I should never.
Can you tell? Can you tell? I'm kind of hooked to it now. Okay, I won't. I won't overdo it.
Yeah,
Of
I
course,
can tell. Yeah.
my partner in this endeavor, Kevin Aldridge. How you doing, bro?
Good,
Keeping us
man. I
sane.
think Phil is too sexy for this podcast, man.
Well,
Terrence.
I'll be honest with you guys. I know a lot of ladies watch this, and I don't want to be a distraction. Okay, let's put it that way.
That's very nice of you, man. Look at you, man, taking the high road. I appreciate that. So turn your sexy down, man, so they can actually pay attention to the conversation.
I want them to be able to concentrate on the discussion. You know what I mean? That's important.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I almost don't know where to start. I mean, we could really start almost anywhere, but I want to start here because when I saw this was very troubling to me. And we know that, you know, since being elected, Donald Trump has been saying that he wants to rename the Gulf of Mexico to Gulf of America. Seems like his supporters love the idea. We might get into why I believe they do. But now I've been reading that now Google Maps has announced that they are going to start to change the name on all of the Google Maps, right? Which people use as reference points for almost every facet of our lives these days. And it's like, here we go again. You know, is this what Joe Biden warned us of when he talked about, you know, the tech bro? He didn't use the word bro, but the tech oligarchy. It seems like Google now is getting in bed with Donald Trump to remake history. How do you feel about this? Is this good? Is this a bad sign or just a terrible sign?
I think it's again more of a distraction. I mean, I think when we start talking about whether you call it the Gulf of Mexico or the Gulf of America, I mean, I guess the question that I would say is, you know, what does that have to do with the price of eggs and milk? Which is, you know, what people are predominantly concerned with. I think this is just more of Donald Trump's, you know, flood the market with as much stuff as you can, throw as much as you can at people. And it's kind of like what I said in the last podcast. It's like, you know, you can't get distracted. You can't take the cheese on stuff like this. I mean, yeah, you could look at it like, is he trying to change history or whatever? But I think in the grand scheme of things, there are going to be a lot of people that are still going to refer to it as the Gulf of Mexico, no matter what Trump calls it or no matter what Google Maps renames it. I just think, you know, spending a lot of time on this type of conversation when he's doing so many more things that are far more impactful and far more damaging than this. I just don't, you know, for me, I'm not going to lose sleep over it, quite frankly. Not when he's, you know, eradicating DEI, the Civil Rights Act, pardoning January 6th rioters. You know, those are the things that we ought to be talking about rather than taking the cheese he's trying to lay out with this one.
I like it. I like it for the American ethnocentricity. I guess not ethnocentricity, but like the centricity of American pride. If we can take ownership, if we're funding it, why not name it after us? And then that gives the future generation something to be proud
of. I think you're confusing maybe the Panama. We're not funding the Gulf of Mexico.
Okay. But okay. So
you're talking Panama Canal, perhaps?
Yes, same thing. Well, it's the same preference in just taking ownership of it. If we have the ability to rename the Gulf of Mexico, the Gulf of America for American ethnocentricity values, I don't see anything wrong with it. Why not? I mean, why not rename it? You know, it's like, I don't have any problem with it. I don't have any. I mean, I think that he's doing it to appease his base and invoke American pride in things. I mean, Gulf of Mexico, it's like he's strong arming. He's like, hey, it's our, if we want to take it, we're going to take it. And if it passes and it goes through, I'm all for it.
Phil, your thoughts?
Well, I would agree with Kevin. There's a pastor named Steve Shokran. He was the founding pastor of the Vineyard Church here, and he used to have a saying, don't major in the minors. And, you know, with as Kevin said, with all the horrific things he's doing in terms of undermining the rule of law, I don't care what he does as far as he can rename, he can put himself on Mount Rushmore for all I care. I'm more concerned about preserving the rule of law.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. It's an interesting text there. I mean, for me, I think it's a really bad and dubious sign. I think that, and I kind of alluded to it in the opening. I think this is exactly what Joe Biden was trying to warn us of, and I think that people are really underplaying. Perhaps even some of my crew members. I think you guys are underplaying, the potential damage of a relationship like this between some nonsense that the president said to now you got social media basically rewriting history just because, right? Just because he said so, right? I think that's very dangerous. I think that's a very dangerous relationship.
I'll agree
And
with you on
so,
that. Nathan, I agree with you on that.
yeah,
But if
but
it's
right
something that's
now,
going to go through
we
Congress,
talking about, but right now, Terrace, and I appreciate that. But right now, where we're talking about is something that Phil and Kevin are like, hey, it's no big deal. It's just the Gulf of America, Gulf of Mexico. But what happens when it's something more serious at a serious time?
Well,
I think people should really pay attention to this.
well, I
Well,
think,
I'll
I'm
give you
not
an
saying,
example of something a lot more serious, and
yeah,
that is this crazy stuff about Greenland and the Panama Canal. That is, he's actually talking about considering military action to take over either something that is owned by another country or an entire country. This is what dictators do. This is what
yeah.
Putin does. Okay,
Right.
that to me is very, very scary.
But can I jump on that and just say real quick that this is what some people do when they're dealing with the beginnings of a dictatorship, like the time people keep talking about this oligarchy. Well, the times before the oligarchy is filled with people making excuses like you guys just did about what is happening in front of them.
Yeah,
This should be scaring everybody right now that a
yeah.
company
But
like
Nathan,
Google that has so much influence on this is across the globe, everybody's life is going to play into the politics and the propaganda from one political party. Is very dangerous to me.
well, Nathan, let me just play devil's advocate here for a minute and put the flip side here. I would disagree with you to some degree about this name change, the changing of a name versus the changing of history. Look, name changes take place and they happen all the time. Whether you're talking about Donald Trump or Joe Biden or Barack Obama or any presidents, there are many people on the right who would argue that, hey, when you change the name from Mount McKinley, to I forget what was it changed to that Donald Trump is now trying to change it back. People on the right would say, well, the left was trying to change history by changing the name from Mount McKinley to something that was woke and more politically correct. So you get these sort of name changes on one side, but it just depends on, the point of view or the lens through which that person is looking at the name change. So many liberals saw no problem with changing the name of Mount McKinley, or quite frankly, changing the names of many of these sites and things that we view as, racially or culturally offensive. It's okay to change it in those instances, and we don't look at it as authoritarian or dictatorship or the changing of history when it's changed to something that we favor. When it's changed to something that we might slightly disagree with, then it's sort of like, oh, whoa, look out. And how often has Google Maps or others fallen in line with name changes that have come under democratic circumstances? So the man is the president of the United States. He's made this determination, what he wanted to do. And I don't think Google Maps or anybody is doing anything differently than they've done when names have been changed under other administrations. So part of the reason why I'm not panicking on this is we have to have some degree of context and fairness in terms of how we look at these things and these name changes, and not, whatever Donald Trump's intentions might be beyond it. I don't think that this name change or Google Maps going along and making the change is necessarily as damaging or as panic worthy as some of the other things he's doing.
Mm.
I like to jump in like what Nathan was saying. Like I could see where if Google or the oligarchies, the big tech oligarchies, give no fact checking, so to speak, and they just put anything out there, and Donald Trump says this is what I want to be out there. That's one thing. He's just throwing stuff out there. But until it goes through Congress and it's an act of Congress, and they change names officially through the act of Congress, it don't really mean nothing to people who are educated and understand that. But I understand, if I'm not mistaken, Nathan, you're saying the people that just get the information out there who are maybe low hanging fruit, who just get information and look at it, oh, this is real. This is real. You know, so I do agree with you on that. That's scary. That is extremely scary. But I think it's going to be up to us as independent journalists or journalists in the mainstream to have people trust us enough to when they present stuff like that, like, oh, that ain't true, man. This is the truth. You know, I think that we're going to be charged with that responsibility to be truth tellers.
Right. And Phil, you want to jump in and say anything before I
No,
get cooking?
no.
Yeah, and I understand your point, Kevin, and I can't say that you don't have a point, and I'm glad you made that point about that. When they changed it from what it was previously before Mount McKinley, there were a lot of people on the Republican side that had an issue with it, and I can see how when you look at this situation, a lot of people will be like, "Yep, it's the same," but it's not the same. Because we cannot forget what we just saw with the inauguration. We ain't seen that before, where you had, including the head of Google, standing behind Donald Trump as if they're being in front of members of Congress, right? We never saw this with Joe Biden, and basically standing there as if like we all together with Donald Trump. So when you do something like that, and we hear about these people running down the Mar-a-Lago to quote unquote kiss the ring. When you see stuff like that, when a move like this is made, yeah, justifiably, yeah, people's antennas should go up because it's not just based upon the move; it's everything we saw that happened before that.
There's the names that got changed too. It happened in the military bases too. They've changed Fort Hood. They've changed all these other military names. And though the people who are military, long-term military people, they don't like it, but that's just the sign of the times. I don't agree with it, but I mean, I see what you're saying. It could be kind of crazy.
Yeah,
So I understand what you're trying to say, Nathan, in terms of what Google and Google Maps is doing. You're saying that, could this be the precursor to further things? I wouldn't disagree with you that it's something that we should be aware of and keep an eye on. But as far as that, this is low hanging fruit for them. Like this is a name change is small potatoes to sort of get behind if you're a Google or any corporate interest, because there's really nothing at stake for them. This isn't a high stakes move for them. Is it something to keep an eye on and to be aware of? Certainly. I mean, I think we've said all along that we need to keep an eye on, how these millionaires and billionaires are moving in terms of the politics with the Trump administration. That goes without saying. I don't think this needs to sound the alarm for us. I would be more concerned if I saw them doing, higher stakes things than a name change. I think this is an easy. Hey, if this gets us a few brownie points, or something down the road, so what? It's a low risk investment for them.
Right. Mm. And you know what I would say to that, Kevin? What I would say is I would feel less concerned if I didn't see the head of Google standing behind Donald Trump on Inauguration Day, like, hey, we the court of the new king. We cannot overlook that and take that out of the context when we're judging what these people do.
Yeah, well, Nick,
it would be foolish to do that.
Keep in mind that every one of those oligarchs gave $1 million for his inauguration.
Right.
That's the kind of thing. And again, I don't care about that. That's the kind of thing that really scares me. And Elon Musk spent $280 million in this campaign, this election. I believe $250 just for Trump. Now, you can talk about polls, you can talk about issues. $250 million can change an election. And the fact that you have people like this that are spending that amount of money to influence an election to me, is a very, very scary thing.
Maybe
Where the
Kamala
people
should
have
have got some
lost
more
out
people to
is
help and
where
donate
when we let too
250,000
much
to
money
help
get back
out.
into politics. That's where the people lost out. The
Yeah.
money in
Well, and I think,
politics is
yeah,
is
and I,
is overwhelmingly and unfairly one-sided for the people that's got the money, obviously. And
yeah,
it's killed
Kamala Harris
politics.
outraised him by 200. She raised him by 3 times. So we can't even talk about how Elon Musk $250 million to Donald Trump's campaign. It doesn't even drop a bucket into how much Kamala Harris spent on her campaign. So that has no, Elon Musk's influence has nothing to do with like campaign finance. So that has nothing.
Oh yeah, it
You
has
can take
everything
you
to
can
do
take
with it.
you take Elon Musk 250 million away, and Kamala Harris still would have lost.
Yeah,
yeah.
no,
I
he,
don't
he
know if I
definitely had an
agree with
impact with
that.
the money.
Yeah, I don't know if I agree with that 100%. I mean, I definitely look. We know for a fact of the matter that the amount of money that you have and that you're able to spend in an election campaign makes a difference. I mean, it makes a difference in the amount of TV ad commercials that you can run. The amount of advertising that you can get out there, and that's a big part of the game in terms of winning elections. If you don't think all of those transgender commercials that they ran against Sherrod Brown in Ohio made a difference in the outcome of that race, I mean, you're kidding yourself. I mean, the market was flooded with those types of negative campaign and television ads that, in my opinion, Sherrod Brown could not overcome. And if I'm not mistaken, I don't even think he had the money that he could compete against that. So you can't say that money is not the biggest determiner in the outcome of political races. It actually is. I think the question is, where should the majority of that money be coming from? From individual, donors and voters, or big corporations who are able to pour millions of dollars in there, way more than the average citizen can do. And so therefore our politicians are more beholden to these special interests. I mean, we talk about this, and it's not just on the Republican side, it's on the Democratic side, too, to a lesser degree, maybe. But big money is a problem that we have in our politics, and it actually dilutes the voting power and the influence of the average person. And I think that that's why so many people want to try to find campaign finance reform to try to get this, to get money out of politics. But when you've got Citizens United and other things like that are that are allowing corporations to quote unquote be people, it makes it very difficult to control that. And even when you try to set limits, business people are very smart about creating, LLCs and shell companies and a whole bunch of other things to get around the limits that are put out there so that they can continue to pour millions of dollars into these campaign coffers of politicians.
Yeah, 100%, no doubt. Phil, I was thinking about you in preparation for today's show, man, and you talked about your conservative values many times, and I thought, I wonder what what if Phil thinks about what Donald Trump is doing. Like, you talked about how you're in favor of the DEI stuff, but it also seems like he's trying to do what I've heard a lot of Republicans say they want done, which is to reduce the size of the government and the role of the federal government. So, what are you thinking right now as you're looking at the first week of the Trump administration? I'm curious.
I was kind of hoping our friend Kevin Gordon would be on this. You were kind of teasing last time that he can run, but he can't hide, or something like that. But the question that I really wanted to ask him is, when Trump pardoned 900 violent offenders who attacked the police and another 600 who broke the law, was that a liberal move or a conservative move? Was that a left wing or a right wing move? Was it a Democratic values or Republican values move? That's a question I'd like him and other Trump supporters to answer. I can
And
tell
we
you.
will. Hopefully we can
Well,
have that conversation Friday, but I want to know what you think about Trump and his attacks on the federal government as a conservative, as a Republican. I've heard you say, like, is it a mixed
well, I
bag
just
for you?
I
Are you like
just
some
said.
things you like, some things you don't? What is there anything you hear from Trump so far that you do like?
Uh, yeah, but I'm trying to think what it is. Obviously, as I said, let me just say some things that deeply offend me, and I think this is from a conservative or me being an ex-prosecutor standpoint, not only letting out all these violent criminals and making them heroes. But also even though he accused Biden of weaponizing the Justice Department, Biden never weaponized it. Biden had nothing to do with that. He is truly weaponizing it now. He puts a guy, Kash Patel, head of the FBI, who has a whole history of following conspiracy theories and lying, and a guy who's totally unqualified, who's only there to do Trump's bidding. And another thing that just happened was they fired numerous Justice Department officials who have strong track records only because they worked on the cases against Trump. And I can tell you, as a prosecutor, they were 100% legitimate cases. So what I would say is, as a conservative, it turns my stomach to see the law being undermined and our Constitution being undermined by this guy. And remember something, that one of the strong traditions in this country that upholds the justice system is that especially since Watergate, that it is critical that the Justice Department be independent from the president. Obviously, that's not happening now. Trump wants, and he said this before in the campaign, he wants to run the Justice Department. He wants them to go after his enemies. So what we're seeing here are the beginnings of a dictatorship, okay? What we're seeing here is that our democracy is being undermined before our eyes.
Right. Somebody said, let Phil cook. I agree. I'm going to follow your energy, Phil.
And that takes nothing away, by the way, this whole idea. That's why I'd love to hear Kevin Gordon's perspective on this. I believe what I'm stating here are basically principles of law, principles of law and order, principles that our Constitution stands for, and upholding the rule of law, which I certainly consider a conservative principle. So I have no problem speaking as I have and attacking these things from a conservative point of view.
Yeah.
What if the Department of Justice is found to be guilty to have weaponized the Department of Justice against Donald Trump? What if they find that out? What if they do an investigation?
What do you mean if they find that out? That's just simply everything has come out that happened, and no, the Department of Justice was not weaponized. Was not. Those are
It's
facts.
just because you say so, right? It's because you say so.
No, because you have. If you're going to accuse the Department of Justice of being weaponized, give me the evidence. Show me the evidence.
Why did they quit? You misspoke. You misspoke. You said, did Donald Trump fire these people? They all quit. They all resigned.
No, you are totally off.
They resigned.
No, they did not.
The guy who
resigned. They resigned. They were the people who the Department of Justice.
I'll let the other crew members support me in this, but Jack Smith was fought. Well, actually, he wasn't. He did quit. Okay, but all these guys,
before Biden got out, they all had a plan to quit.
Tarris, you don't know your facts. I'm sorry. I
just said to you that they quit, and you were like, "Oh no, they didn't." Oh yeah, but Jack Smith's quit. Come on, guys. If it is found,
but
Kash Patel gets confirmed, when Kash Patel gets confirmed, and he does an investigation, and he's able to undo and to release things and show that the Department of Justice weaponized, and you're sitting here saying, I'm crazy. But if you said, them big tech oligarchies that are standing behind them are going to write the rules.
Your facts are wrong. That's what I'm saying. Your facts are wrong.
We'll see. When 100 days. Well, you bet you guys, since I've been on this programming, have been telling me I've been wrong since I've been on here, and I've been spot on every single time.
And you've been wrong every single time.
Okay.
Here's the thing, and I think what Tarris and Phil sort of illustrate in their back and forth is neither side is going to believe the other. Liberals are not going to believe it. To Tarris's point, let's just say Kash Patel and the Republicans or the Trump administration goes in and they do their investigation. There's no liberals who are going to believe that they aren't cooking the books or making things up or creating their own evidence out of whole cloth to support this notion that the DOJ was weaponized. So even if they were to come out with some kind of report, regardless of what it said, it would not be accepted by liberal side because they already have an opinion.
First of all, I don't agree with that, and I also don't like.
It's absolutely true. It's absolutely true, Phil. There's nothing that the Trump administration will come out with now that you will believe. And I mean, you'll say that, You'll say that now. You'll say that now because it's the politically correct thing to say. But that's the reality of where we are in this country is there's nothing that the Republicans are going to come out with because they already feel like it's a sham. It's a sham investigation. This is Donald Trump. Let's just face it. Donald Trump is on his retribution tour. It should come as no surprise to anybody that folks are getting their heads cut, that they're getting it chopped. If I run on the narrative that I was being set up or that I was going to be weaponized, do you really think that if I win, those same people that I felt like threw me under the bus and falsely convicted me, I'm going to let them stay in those jobs? That doesn't even support the narrative. So if I allowed them to stay in their jobs, that would mean I was just blowing smoke at y'all and telling you that I think that the Justice Department was weaponized. So quite naturally, if I win the White House, I'm cutting heads. I'm cutting all those heads of the people that I felt like weaponized and came after me.
Do you think that's right or wrong? Do you think
Who
it's right or
cares,
wrong?
sir? When I've been coming on here,
Look, Phil, if you're coming from Donald Trump's perspective,
no, I'm not.
And those who support him, it's absolutely the right
thing. What do you think? I don't want to hear Donald Trump's perspective. I don't want to hear the liberal perspective. I want to know what you think about it.
But Phil, you can't separate somebody's perspective, political perspective and point of view from the opinion that they give. So whether everybody wants to sit out here and say, oh, I've got some objective point of view that I'm looking at this. Bull crap. We're all coming at it from the political lens through which we look at it. So if you come at it from a liberal democratic point of view, of course you're going to say what Donald Trump is doing is wrong, that he's getting rid of career prosecutors who weren't doing anything other than doing their job. Why are you going to say that? Because you believe that the Department of Justice was not weaponized. And so, of course, you are going to, which I happen to agree with. I don't think the Department of Justice was weaponized. And I do think that he's purging a lot of folks who were simply doing their job and doing the right thing. But if I'm him and I'm one of his supporters, they don't believe what you and I believe, Phil. They don't believe that. They believe it was weaponized, and nothing that you or I say is going to convince them otherwise.
Exactly. And that's what Kevin just said is exactly what I'm saying. And I'm trying to get, like what I keep saying over and over about Dana White being in control of what's going on, like the narrative and stuff. And then you got the oligarchies behind. And then you guys are still trying to think with a logical, sensible, emotional, intelligent thought process. It's war. Nathan keeps saying it. And y'all, and every time I come on here, instead of y'all listening to me from a conservative perspective and tell you about how much at war we are, you're like, oh no, Tarris, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. And what did I say when Donald Trump got elected? I said the first thing he's going to do, you're going to see the biggest mass deportation ever. That's the first thing you're going to see. The first thing y'all like, what is he going to do? I said you're going to see it. And what are you guys seeing? The fear of the exactly the script. And the more like the lady that said, quit having me on here. If you quit having me on here, y'all are going to continue to be in an echo chamber of not even having an outside opinion. And whenever I bring the outside opinion, instead of you telling me that I'm wrong, just open up to another perspective because I've been spot on.
Yeah.
I mean, we're all spot on, right? In our own heads. So I get it. I appreciate that.
True.
I love the swagger. I wouldn't like it any other way. Yeah, they declared war a long time ago. They declared war, and I've been saying this for years. I'll say it again. Everybody here, I think we're all old enough to remember the Harlem Globetrotters, right? And they would always play against the Washington Generals. And if you ever went to go see it, my mother took me to go see it here at Riverfront Coliseum many years ago. I used to love it, right? They had a Meadowlark Lemon. They even had the cartoons with Scooby-Doo and everything. I was all into it. But it was predetermined. The outcome was predetermined. And so what would happen is you would have this contest where the Harlem Globetrotters would do tricks and they would just make fools out of the Washington Generals. That's what the Republican Party is trying to do to the Democrats. And they're damn close to doing it right now.
We want to destroy
there's an
you
election.
guys.
Yeah, there's an election. And yeah, you got a choice, kind of. But the outcome is already predetermined. And along the way, we're just going to ridicule you and turn you into a court jester for our own entertainment. You see it right in front of you right now. And again, this is 40, 50 years of propaganda in place. And Donald Trump is just a vehicle. Trump don't know what the larger plot is. Trump is a narcissist who loves being in charge and telling people what to do. And having people kiss his rear end, and he likes
Come
making
on,
a lot of
Nate.
money,
Let
and
Nate
he's just
cook.
the vehicle for other larger, deeper forces, and they real close to it. They are very close to it. And it doesn't take a whole lot because, as I keep saying, most humans are not ready for no smoke. We like to say we are. Hey, we don't want no smoke. You want to do your job and have your little time away and watch the Bengals and watch your sports and be with your woman or be with your man, and you don't want no trouble. So when the trouble comes, most people are not going to stand up, and they know this. They know this because they've been watching us and studying us for years. So, I
It's
hate to
not
sound
it's
all
not
doom
that
and
people
gloom. I
won't
don't think
stand up.
it's quite there yet. But what I'm saying is people need to pay attention and really think larger about what's happening in front of them.
Yeah. It's not that people won't stand up, Nathan, but it's people won't stand up until it gets to a critical mass point. Like what we've never really been good at is being preemptive. What we are very good at is being reactionary, or right when we get onto the precipice of disaster, where it's unavoidable, where it's undeniable, people have a tendency to kind of step up there. I mean, look at it even here locally in Cincinnati. I mean, we're probably one of the most reactionary communities that's out there. People show up in mass after stuff has already happened, and it doesn't matter how many committee meetings or council meetings or whatever reporting has been done ahead of time. People don't show up in mass until stuff hits the fan. And I think, unfortunately, that's too much of the human nature, is that people will stand up, but unfortunately, sometimes it's after things have already gotten out of hand.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. Yep. That's what history tells us over and over again. And along that way is a lot of conversations where people are like, hey, I see a problem. That's not really a problem. You're making too big of a deal out of it, right? There's a movie called Don't Look Up, which is it's a satirical look at situations like this, where there's this threat to, the earth, right? And people want to make jokes about it and they want to deny it. But yet they can look up and see the asteroid right there coming close to them, but they just won't look up. Some of the same things I'm seeing right now, this is just on social media and having conversations. I'm seeing some of the same kind of behaviors right now where people want to bury their head in the sand and act like we've seen this before. And I'm not saying we haven't, but that doesn't mean that there isn't something for you to maybe focus on and kind of ask yourself, what if? And just kind of think about different scenarios and how you're going to be able to protect your family. And that's what we all care about at the end of the day, right? How do
Yeah.
you protect your family? That's what black, white, Jewish, whatever. We all want our families to be safe. And I'll keep saying it. That's really the tie that binds us. We keep getting caught up with Democrat and Republican. It's really about families, right? You love your son, Phil. I love my son. Whatever you have, Tarris, you love your boys, right? You love the people. We all love people in our family. That should really be the tie that binds us. But we get caught up with these arbitrary, man-made differences about who we worship and our skin color and what high school we went to, and we're missing the bigger picture and really the bigger opportunity, quite honestly.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Well said.
Someone says, are you streaming live on YouTube? I believe from my side of things, we're streaming live on YouTube and Facebook. I know some people said they had some issues, but I haven't been able to take a look at it, because we're live on the air right now. Let's get in some comments here before we move to our next topic.
Let me, if I could, share just one thing.
Sure. Right, go right ahead.
I was reading something, or maybe I saw. Excuse me. I'm sorry.
He was just confirming that we are live, Phil. That's all. Go right ahead, bro.
I was looking at a video that somehow popped up about the Eichmann trial, which, for those of you who may not know or remember, Adolf Eichmann was basically the architect of the Holocaust. Okay, he kind of carried out all the logistics, the trains, the death camps, the whole thing. And as you may know, in 1961 is the Israeli secret, whatever you call them, captured him in Argentina, took him back to Israel, where he was tried for basically killing millions of people. And it's, by the way, speaking of the rule of law, it's an ironic thing that the Israelis gave him the justice that he didn't give to the millions that he was responsible for killing. And I bring this up because I wonder if we were on this show now and that trial in Israel was going on, and I said, this man is evil. We have evidence that he committed these horrendous facts, and he needs to be found guilty and punished. I wonder if, based on our discussion, if some of you would say, well, Phil, look, you're not going to convince the Nazis that they did anything wrong. You're not going to convince the anti-Semites. Hey, Phil, and you're not going to convince the Israelites that the Nazis weren't that bad. So, in other words, I feel like people say, well, the facts don't matter. We just got to understand it from the perspective of the different sides. And I would respectfully say, in that situation and in others, including the crimes that Trump was charged with, I think there are facts and there is evidence. And I don't care if there are people who want to have alternative facts or come up with their own conspiracy theories or imagine that Kash Patel or somebody's going to come up with proof that actually Trump didn't do anything wrong. See, I believe in fact. I believe there are facts and there are provable facts.
And Phil, hold on, Tarris. You ought to talk to some of the people. You ought to talk to some of the people in the Jewish community. I've had an opportunity to spend some time there, and we've had a lot of conversations about the Holocaust. And there's a certain arrogance in your statement, Phil, that was also existent in that time, which they will tell you that was existent in Nazi Germany, where there were people who thought like you thought, that facts were going to matter, that we were more evolved. They were more evolved as a society than they were. And this was pre-Hitler. This was pre-Nazi party. And I think what you are underestimating is, and the point that I'm trying to make is, you're right. I hope that there are more people in America where facts matter than don't. But you also have to recognize and reconcile the very real fact that there may be more people who don't care about facts than you think.
No,
and that is what, that's what you're not disputing and what I'm arguing.
I'm talking about myself, not everybody else.
Well, it doesn't matter. I mean, Phil, look, I'm just going to be honest. It doesn't matter what you and I think. If we're outvoted, you'll be in a camp. It does matter. You'll be in a camp somewhere. You'll be in a camp somewhere spouting facts right before they send you to some kind of gas chamber or something. If those who don't care about facts are the ones that went out. And these are the types of things that we have to confront, the very brutal realities of where we are in terms of, yeah, facts may matter to you and I individually, but if we're on the losing side of the facts battle, it don't matter. In the end, you'll be living in the America you say you don't want to live in. So in order to combat that, you can't just sit there and sit on your high horse of arrogance. It's about how do you strategize and how do you combat that so that facts come out on top. And I think the thing that's scaring so many liberals right now is they feel like they're losing that argument. And part of the reason why they might be losing that argument is the strategy and the tactics they're using. And we've talked about this before on this podcast. And if you want to talk about war and how you're gonna go about trying to win this, if you really do believe that we're at a critical inflection point in our country, you're going to have to adjust tactics in a way that are going to be more effective. You can't just stand on the arrogance and the belief that, because you want to believe it, that this is the right way to go about it, and that's going to win out in the end. We're on a different battlefield these days. And I'm not saying that I disagree with anything that you're saying from a principle standpoint, Phil. What I'm arguing about is where we are as a country and where maybe where half of the people are.
I wanted to piggyback on what he said. At no other time in my lifetime or at the end of our lifetimes has information been so accessible. You can do a basic Google search or any kind of search to get ChatGPT, any kind of search to get any kind of information that you want. So when these oligarchs are controlling the information that's going out And you guys made fun of me a bunch of times talking about TikTok and stuff like that. But I could get on a platform with 4 guys who are similar to us and reach 100,000 people. And I know you're like, oh, that's just TikTok. That's just TikTok. But I mean, I don't think that you guys are even understanding the strategies. Like I was saying to somebody, when you look at the stuff that Trump is saying that you might not agree with, but you're not listening to, they won the youth vote from 18 to 35 vote by 36 points because of his 18-year-old son, Barron. You think they're playing with? You think they care about what we? I mean, seriously, I try to be calm when I talk, but it's kind of hard when I'm like, is this chess or checkers that we're doing here? We're talking about percentage points on winning elections to push the narrative, and you guys are talking about, oh, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. When I'm trying to say, hey, that's why I said when I said it didn't matter. Elon Musk $250 million didn't matter because this election was still going to be because it was information that was received. The Joe Rogan podcast, the mismet. She could have spent $3 trillion. The strategy was wrong, and every time we kept saying, "Hey, man, this is the approach that we're taking," I'm like, ha 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 ha. And now, and I keep saying, and you see these guys are lining up. The information highway is lining up behind Trump. To tell, and I'll say this, and I'll land. I'll let you guys talk about it. Whenever they start with like the George Floyd bill that that I don't think it ever got passed. When they start going and erasing that, hopefully then you guys will be like, all right, here we go. They're not playing. They're not playing.
So Tarris, 2 things can be true at the same time. You got to have strategy. Okay, if you don't have it, you can have all the money in the world, and if you don't have a sound strategy, then you're right. You're not going to win. Strategy is a big part of it. But I will say strategy and millions of dollars in a political campaign does make a difference. You got to have money. You can have the best strategy in the world, but if you can't pump that strategy out and saturate it, like being on the Joe Rogan podcast one time is one thing, but being able to saturate the market with commercials that you can run ad nauseum over and over again, like that's the thing. Like the message repeatedly is what sticks in people's minds. You know, a one-off on a podcast may or may not stick with somebody, but it's that repetition. It's the saturation of the message that sticks. And you got to have dollars to do that, brother.
Yeah, I agree. Going back to what we were talking about originally between you and Phil, between Kevin and Phil, I agree with TNT. The truth and the facts are non-negotiable. People must stand on the truth and control the narrative. So, if Kash Patel becomes the FBI director and he puts out some report saying that all of a sudden they found evidence of everything they said, right, was actually true, I'm going to look at it objectively to decide for myself as to whether I think that it's real or not. Now, my bias is that since we know who Kash Patel is and the things that he said, and we know the kind of person that Donald Trump is and the things that he's done and said, can I trust these individuals? But that's not based upon who they are because they're Republicans. That's based upon the things they've done already. So I don't want to concede that just because they're conservative, you have to automatically disagree with them. No, Trump is different. I'm talking about Trump and what he has done. He's shown himself to be corrupt. Kash Patel is talked about on podcasts, right? He's talked about that, he's got all these crazy theories about what the government is. So that's why I wouldn't trust it. And I think that if you feel like you know what the truth is, no matter what somebody else feels like, right? You got to stand on that, right? It's just like, you got to do good whenever you can. But you don't stop doing good just because some people are going to do evil. They're going to do what they're going to do. You have to stand on it. And I think that's what every person can do. When you're having conversations on social media or when you're having conversations like maybe at the job or talking with people, stand on whatever your provable, objectable, or even it's not objective. It's just the way you feel. Stand on that and don't be afraid to say it.
Well, here's what I think is just sort of a human dimension. And you talked about this, and this goes to my point, is who will people accept facts from? If I don't trust somebody, and if you don't trust somebody, you're not just going to take your standard of proof to accept information from somebody you don't trust. The threshold is incredibly high and maybe even in some cases insurmountable. So there has to be some measure of or level of trust, or me willing to put my trust in what you say or what you're going to give me, for me to even consider the information that you're about to give me. We all know some people who have been proven liars or thieves or who are corruptible. There's nothing that they could tell you, that you would believe on face value. And they would really have to come with some strong, compelling, damnable evidence for you to take what they say as truth. I think that's where many liberals are with Donald Trump and the people who are with. There would have to be, the evidence would almost have to be,
It'd have to be real evidence. That's it. It would
yeah,
just have to
well,
be real
and
evidence.
again, real evidence can be depending on your bias and your prism that you're coming
Absolutely.
from. Real evidence can be subjective to every person.
Absolutely.
Especially like whenever you're.
But don't overlook the percentage of the population that has the ability, right, to say, look, I don't like Donald Trump. I didn't vote for Donald Trump. But if some information comes to them, they can look at it objectively. There are those people out there. Let's not overlook them.
What about Hunter Biden's laptop? What about Hunter Biden's laptop? If they say the DOJ did not have anything to do, and y'all are like, what did Hunter Biden's laptop have to do with anything? Conservatives.
Can you explain that real quick, bro? Okay. Can you explain what was the significance?
Because the conservative thought process about the Hunter Biden laptop is the Department of Justice protected him, because if they would have got the laptop when they wanted to, they would have been able to find out the Ukrainian collusion type stuff about him being on the board of directors and getting the money, and that's a whole Ukrainian stuff. That's the whole thing.
So that was the issue.
So Department of Justice stopped the Hunter Biden laptop, and y'all are like, no. And then if Kash Patel can go back, because it was about the Hunter Biden level was about a lot of the crack cocaine, the trafficking, just because of what he weaponized the Department of Justice to protect his son. So if they can find that out, that's just going to go down the.
Can we tell the whole story though?
Encapsulate people's minds.
Can we tell the whole story?
What Tarris is saying about that, the larger thing, why it wasn't even really about Hunter Biden. What the Republicans wanted to do was they wanted to link Hunter Biden's activities to essentially say that that Hunter Biden was leveraging his father's presidency to be able to make money, and basically Joe Biden was getting his piece of whatever Hunter Biden was doing with these foreign nations. So basically,
where's the laptop come into it?
Well, because the evidence of that was supposedly, if they had gotten the laptop, you would have found evidence of the connections where Hunter Biden was trading his father's influence for business opportunities, money, etc. That was what the conservative argument,
which is against the law, correct?
It was only about Hunter Biden so much to the extent that they could link what Hunter Biden and his activities, the activities that he was doing, to show that Joe Biden was somehow connected to that and was influence peddling. Basically, what Donald Trump was doing with his kids during the first.
That's correct. But since the Department of Justice suppressed the laptop, but then whenever they went to the low hanging fruit, hold on. When they went to the low hanging fruit, that's when they said, "Hey, low hanging fruit. Remember when Joe Biden said a little piece of crack cocaine will get you all this in the crime bills that Joe Biden wrote, and how many black lives it affected, and how many people it affected? It took their fathers out of the home, but his son gets to run around and smoke crack and run around with hookers on camera, which is against the law." And Joe Biden said, if you got one little piece of crack, we're going to throw you away. These are the type of things that are going to be weaponized against when they say this is how they weaponize the Department of Justice. And these are logical things. I know people are like, oh, it's crazy.
But I'm trying to find the logic in it. So
you're trying to find this. If the Department of Justice suppressed Hunter Biden and protected him while Joe Biden was in presidency, focused on Donald Trump, even used Fannie Willis and all that kind of stuff to focus on Donald Trump. And then right before Joe Biden gets out, he pardons everybody with unlimited pardons and says nobody can touch him. And then when Donald Trump gets control and he starts finding out evidence, like you said, nobody's going to believe anything.
Yeah. See, I always thought, Tarris, that part of the reason why conservatives kept talking about the laptop, because I'm still kind of shaky on it. I know a little bit, but I thought maybe you could give me some insight because you keep bringing it up, and I'm like, maybe there's something significant. But what I always thought was part of it was that, people said there really wasn't even a laptop or something like that. Wasn't that reported? Was that part of the story, or am I getting that wrong?
That's the part of the story that they wanted to suppress it or whatever. There was a laptop that was seized and then there was no evidence. They would not release any of the evidence. It's kind of similar to the Epstein files and stuff like that. They just kept the laptop, and everybody's like, just release the stuff with the laptop, and it'll be good. But then I don't know too much more past that. All I know is where we're at now is there was no laptop information released. Hunter Biden's got an unlimited pardon. He was supposed to get sentenced because he was a felon too, right? But everything's done. Hunter Biden gets to go free. But all these black men, for the low-hanging fruit, all these black men who got crack cocaine charges, they're going, oh man, so is the Bidens above the law? Did he really have these dealings with Ukraine? Is he really paying Big Daddy like they got him saying on thing? Oh, let me get my cut. I'm gonna make sure Big Daddy gets his cut too.
That sounds like you all in on the conspiracy, huh?
I'm not all in.
Touched the nerve, huh?
No.
It's
not a nerve. It's not a nerve. You ask how are they going to justify using the Department of Justice? I just ran down you a whole thing that they're going to do, and they're going to say, and that's exactly how they're going to. That's just one avenue.
Well,
there's
so
so many.
The laptop got into their hands. Am I correct, Harris? Tarris, I'm sorry, Tarris. Am I correct? At some point, the laptop got into the hands of somehow it got into the hands of Republican elected officials, right?
I don't know about that.
I seen Margie Taylor Greene. She took some photographs from it and was flashing them during a session of Congress. So yeah, the Republicans have the laptop. Did they ever find anything, any incriminating evidence? I never heard anything.
Hey, that's not for me.
So here's what I think, and we can move on from this laptop thing to not keep rehashing it. But I think you got to understand sort of the politics and where all of this began, and it sort of goes into what we're talking about. DL the fourth on here made a comment about he asked a question. So you don't think Trump was targeted? Like that was his question. So if you are on the right, and I think it's all from the perspective or the view in which you look at it. What one cannot argue is rightly or wrongly in terms of how you view whether Donald Trump should have been looked at or not. He has been investigated thoroughly many times, whether it's by the January 6th committee, whether it's by the Department of Justice, whether it's the hush money cases in New York or whatever. There's without question, Donald Trump has probably been the most investigated former president, maybe in the history of our country. For those who would look at that, many people looked at that, particularly those on the right, part of MAGA, and said, hey, this is all a targeted attempt to keep him from running because you don't want him to get elected again. Just look at all of these cases. Just look at all these cases you're bringing against
Willis.
Look at how you're twisting the rules of law to be able to make these charges against him, to take what was a federal charge and turn it into a state charge. These are all arguments, whether you agree with them or not. These are the arguments that are being made.
That's all I'm saying.
If you are on the right and you're looking at all of these investigations that are going up against Donald Trump, and certainly they're being allowed to run their full course of investigations at all levels. If you're saying, hey, there's some connections between a sitting president, his son, and some evidence that could potentially be on this laptop that could connect him to something, yet you feel like the investigative aspects of that are being, as Tarris said, suppressed. Okay, the Department of Justice is not pursuing this as vigorously as they have the charges against Trump or the state charges against Trump. It doesn't seem that way. And here you're talking about a sitting president versus a guy who's no longer even in office, but you're scared you don't want him to run again. So there's a sense on the right that the same vigor in which Donald Trump was being investigated, those same things weren't being applied to the Hunter Biden laptop situation. Now, let's just say for the sake of argument, I don't know all the details in this, but let's just say to the sake of argument to your point, let's just say they get the laptop, they investigate it, and they look at it, and there's nothing in it. At least the DOJ can say, hey, we thoroughly investigated this thing. We didn't find anything. There's nothing to it, right? You can shut that down. But through all of the sort of the delays and all of that stuff that went on with Hunter Biden before he actually did wind up in court on some charges, which was less than, I think it was some tax charges and gun charges or whatever that he wound up getting in trouble for. what the right now has is this narrative that they can say, hey, you guys didn't want to investigate this, you didn't look into it. Then when you finally got him on something that was lesser, you know,
you pardoned them.
yeah,
let him go.
Well, but even before that, I think they were saying that the penalty that he was going to face was going to be very light before got thrown out, and I think he got reconvicted again on the more serious charges. So if you're looking at it from the perspective on one side, that's how they make the case of the weaponization of the Justice Department. Is that's the narrative, and that's why the laptop matters. If you're trying to figure out why the laptop matters to the right, it's an unequal application of justice where Biden and his son sort of got the kid glove treatment, but you went all out against Donald Trump. That's you got to understand the politics of the laptop to really understand why it's relevant. So that took longer than I wanted, but maybe
it sounds deep, and probably that's why I haven't gone that far down to try to figure it all out. But it sounds like some BS. Like, there's a space out there. I know and I do the same thing. We generalize, left or right, but there's a space out there where people who are on the left have the ability to look at things and process them objectively. And that's separate from how they feel about Donald Trump. And I think there's probably people like that on the right as well. There's a lot of Republicans who thought, after looking at the evidence as it was presented from news sources that they trusted, and maybe some news sources that they don't really go to a lot, they came to the conclusion that by what they see, he should have been prosecuted. But yet they're still Republicans, though. But I hear you. That's the thought process. I'll say it again. I think good people got to stand on business. Like, if you know better, act like it. Speak out. Don't be quiet. At your water cooler, if it's appropriate, have those conversations and speak your mind, and don't just concede that space to people that don't know what they're talking about. And that goes for both sides, I guess. So it is what it is. A lot of let's see, what is this right? Nat writes, the lack of investment in education in this country is pitiful. It's pitiful. Well, I mean, I don't know. That investment has been put on pause.
I like it. I think. I mean, if
Trump has frozen. Let me get all out, Tarris. Trump has put in White House orders to freeze federal grants and loans. Right. That doesn't include individual payouts like Medicare, but there's a lot of people at nonprofits and a lot of people around this country who are like, what's happening next? And maybe this is what Republicans have been looking for. They want to pull the button, pull back the money, and then kind of re-examine everything to I guess they're looking for government waste. They're probably looking for opportunities for their friends to make money. But all right, Phil's got to step away for a second. But this is the world that we live in. Welcome to it, right? Trump 2.0. And then, when people say, well, this is what he said, we shouldn't be surprised. I'm like, I don't think this is a surprise. I mean, but we still are reacting to, what is going on. And, it's going to be a mixture of reactions. I mean, people take things different ways. So it's been quite interesting. TNT writes, and they are willing to overlook it to win. That's all that matters to MAGA and the enablers who support him. I mean, she's absolutely right. I've been saying it, and I don't mean this to be disrespectful, but the Republican Party looks like more of a cult to me. They don't seem as if they're based upon a set of policy priorities. The only priority is whatever Donald Trump says. I mean, if you go back to the RNC, they didn't even have a platform. They put out no platform ideas.
Dana White.
It didn't really matter. It's, you could put out a platform idea, but if Donald Trump gets on behind the podium and says the complete opposite, that now becomes the direction of the party. So, it's going to be interesting to see what we get after 4 years of Donald Trump. Do you think he's going to be able to remake the federal government the way, they get him talking about they want to do, for better or for worse?
I think they will.
Yeah, I think he's already doing it.
And I agree with you. I agree with the Fed, like, to put the freeze on the Fed right now. Just put a freeze on it for a minute. They've done it before with COVID and all that kind of stuff. Let's put a freeze on it and see exactly what's going on, reallocate in the whole Doge thing. That's what I wanted to ask you guys, if you guys thought, if any had more about the Doge thing, with you're talking about the federal government, and if you think there's any correlation with Doge and the federal government, because I don't. I think that they use Elon Musk for his influence and his power, and hearing about 50, 60 days, they're going to kick his ass to the curb. That's just my thought. But I agree with like locking things down to the federal level just to see exactly, cut the fat. As far as and I'll say that because being in city administration now, things move slow. People put stuff off just to have a job for tomorrow. You know what I'm saying? They don't want to do it today because they got a job tomorrow, job security, so to speak. So they think they could take something that they could get done in 24 hours and they stretch it out to a longer time. And I've seen litigators and legislators do the same exact thing. So whenever the Congress is moving really, really slow, it could move faster. And if they really put some efficiency on it, I think we'll have a better, smoother running government, especially if they start talking about blockchain technology and stuff like that. So if they start implementing blockchain technology in the federal government to where you can't lie or misplace documents. It's a blockchain. You put it in the blockchain and there's a seal to where you can it goes, you know who it goes out to, you know who it touches. I think that'll cut some efficiency in the government. So I agree with it, especially in the Department of Education.
So, Tarris, you think that Trump and his billionaire boys club, now called his cabinet, you think they have the best interests of the people in heart?
So Elon Musk is not a part of his cabinet, nor will he ever be. He doesn't have to get confirmed by the Congress. So he is nothing. He is expendable. So if you're talking about like RFK or the Stacey or the Gnome or Hedgetaff or all the guys that he is getting confirmed, I do believe that he's putting his people in place who he wants, not the people who you guys think like Elon Musk. He has nothing to do with anything. He has nothing. He's just a
But that's not my question. My question is, do you think that Trump and the people that he's put in these cabinet positions, do you think they have the people's best interest at heart?
I do. Especially like RFK. I believe that he's going to get to the bottom of some of the vaccine stuff. And I believe that the Department of Defense, Hedgetaff, I believe that he is a good man, a good soldier who tells some truths, he's been there. He's tested and proven he's been there. And I believe that he tells some truth. Right, Nathan, you said billionaires. I don't think anybody on his cabinet is a billionaire. That's why I was saying to you.
Yeah, that's
Elon
not true.
Musk.
Trump's got more cabinet members that are billionaires than ever before.
Cabinet members?
Cabinet members, yes.
Okay. Well,
cabinet level positions run by billionaires, yes.
Cabinet levels positions who have been confirmed by the Congress.
Not yet confirmed. We'll see.
Well, I mean, like I don't want to know.
Some of them,
ones have been confirmed. The Patel, not Patel, but because Patel, he's not a billionaire. The Hedgetaff, he's not a billionaire. Gnome, she's not a billionaire. RFK,
I didn't
he's not
say
a
all.
billionaire. I can't think. I'm trying to think of one billionaire. I can't think of one billionaire.
You're trying to think of one billionaire? Okay.
I'm just trying to think of one. You said billionaires on his cabinet, so I'm trying to think of one. I think you're thinking about like the other people, like the Vivek Ramaswamis and the other people who are the billionaires who are outside, who are not being confirmed. There's a difference. There's a difference between going through the process of being confirmed and just being on the outside, talking heads. There's completely different.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you should look that up, man. Yeah, he's got more billionaires that he had in his cabinet. Of course, some of them have not been confirmed yet than any other administration.
Okay, I'll look that up. I will.
Here's a couple things that I would kind of posit here. Is to your question, do they think they're doing things that are in the best interest of the people? And I would answer that by saying, like, a villain never sees themselves as a villain, right? Of course, we think about, the cartoon characters who come in who are just like nefariously evil, and they have, sort of megalomaniacal tendencies, and they have nothing in mind but destruction. I think what you have here are people who may believe they have the best interests of the people in heart by what they think is the best way to run our government or to shape America. And from their perspective, they might actually literally believe that the things that they're doing and the way that they're going about doing it, is the best way to do it, that's going to benefit the country and move it forward and make it better. Obviously, people are going to disagree with that. That's the nature of our politics. That's the battle of our parties, is who's got the better way to make it better for everybody else. And we disagree on fundamentally in some areas and ways about how to do that, about how to improve life for everybody. So do I think everybody that Donald Trump has in his orbit is sort of like this evil, self-serving individual. No, I think there are probably some people who actually believe that some of these things are going to, make the country better, make the government better. I do think that, yeah, it's all self-serving to a degree. Do I think the Elon Musks of the world want to come up with products and inventions that are going to make things better for humanity? I think they kind of do want to do that. And the byproduct of that is they get to make billions of dollars, off of those ideas as well. So I think Musk wants to, push the limits of what he can do with technology for the beneficiary, to benefit the world quite naturally, but also it's going to make him a lot of money. So I always say, two things can be true at the same time.
Yeah, So Phil, the question is, do you think that, Trump's what is his intentions? Do you think Trump and the people he's surrounded himself with in his government, in his cabinet, do they mean the people good things, or is there something else going on?
You're asking, are their intentions good, even if we may disagree with their?
Yeah, I mean, do they mean good things for the people?
Well, it's interesting. I watched a movie last night. I'd recommend it. It's called The Order, and it's basically about the FBI's investigation of the Aryan Nation in Idaho and places like that. And they actually show these guys, these Aryan Nation guys, in church, talking their thing, and they have a Nazi flag, all this, that. But they are very serious. They believe this stuff. Okay, so do I think there are not a lot of people in Trump's base that believe all these ridiculous conspiracy theories? Yeah, I think there are. There are. But I would also say that within my party, the Republican Party, there are an awful lot of prominent leaders that know it's all, pardon my language, bullshit. They know it's not true. And yet they go along with it because for their own power and money, they go along with it. And I guess even though I was watching with anger at these Aryan Nation guys about how they were thinking and doing, in a way, I have even more kind of anger for what my mom used to call the good Germans, the people in Congress, in Mitch McConnell, all the others, Lindsey Graham, who know better, but go along with it for their own selfish interests.
I think there's a lot of good people out there on both sides of the political spectrum. A lot of good, God-fearing, family-loving, hardworking people. And I don't see a whole lot in this administration, if anything, that I think is going to be good for those people. Now, if you're already wealthy and well-connected, yeah, this is for you. But if you got to get up and work every single day, if you lose your job and within a year or so, you got to find something real quick to keep the bills on. I don't see anything that I see from Trump and his people that is good for those type of people right there at all. In fact, I think you're going to take a lot of big steps backwards. And I should have prefaced that by saying like working class people, but that's just where I stand on it. Let me play a video.
Before you do that, Nathan, I just want to
ahead.
seize on that last point. I think here's the thing that they cannot be underestimated, and it's already like this foregone conclusion that this is the era of MAGA and the era of Trump, and it's never going to go anywhere, or I mean that it's going to be never ending and unending and all of this stuff. Look, there's the very real possibility that over the next 4 years that Donald Trump screws this thing up so bad and messes over so many people economically that he will not get reelected, or his successor will not get reelected in 2028, because exactly to the point that you've said, if people are damaged economically in the way that you just said, based on his policies, he will not survive that. MAGA will not survive that. It's easy to sort of sit in the despair right now because he just won and say, that this is immutable or it won't change, or conservatives sitting in their living in their glory right now, feeling like the train's never going to pull into the station. I guarantee you right now, if he screws over Americans economically and they suffer, he will not recover from that. He won't. That'll be the end of his final death knell, assuming we have another.
Can I throw a caveat into this, what you were just saying?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a little dangerous to always assume that even if our economic interest is being improved, that therefore whatever else is going on is okay. I think that if you look at history, the two greatest economic resurgencies in the last 100 years were Italy and Germany after World War I. If you look at it strictly from an economic standpoint, of course, until they got bombed out in the war, if you look at it from those people, other than the Jews, obviously, those people really did much, much better economically. But so I guess what I'm cautioning is, even if in the next couple of years the economy is just doing great, jobs, everything, if we lose our fundamental rights, it doesn't matter.
Can I say one thing?
I don't disagree with you there, Phil, but the only thing I would say about that is, and one of the things that we saw in this election is when people are doing well, they're willing to overlook that when they're doing well financially,
right?
They're willing to let some things slide. They'll let some things, regardless of how untoward or whatever you and I think it is, they'll overlook it if they're doing well.
But hey, Kevin, just know,
like it's not the whole ball game. The economy is not the whole ball game. But if the economy tanks, in addition to the things that he's doing that are objectionable, they absolutely won't survive it. So I guess my point is if Nathan's prediction that a lot of middle class and poor people are going to suffer under Trump economically, and the rich are just going to get richer, if that happens to be the case, along with these other things that he's doing, the mass deportations and all of the ugliness that's going to come along with that, I don't believe MAGA will survive that. If he does well economically, we'll see. So I think
I want to piggyback off of what you said in history as well. Like Kevin was saying, history, we're aware of what you're saying. And look at Richard Nixon. And when he had the ability to he was the youngest elected vice president, just like J.D. Vance, and what they did and how Watergate went down. We're aware of what you're saying, Kevin. And what you're saying, you said it beautifully. If MAGA's not here forever, and we know it, and I'll be grateful for the day that MAGA goes away, because the Republican Party will still be strong. MAGA will be a facet of like a Tea Party or something like that, because it's a be gone. But you're absolutely right. But we are aware of that, and with the people who are white, I don't think that's not going to be the thing. History won't repeat itself to where another Watergate will happen to get J.D. Vance out of the thing. J.D. Vance 2028.
Let's move on here. I want to play this clip for you. This is from local news here, and it is a clip of Ken Kober, who is the Cincinnati's FOP president, and he was asked questions about the fact that the president, Donald Trump, pardoned people who had assaulted police officers, and I thought his response was very interesting. I want to play this for you. Just give me a second here as I got to connect it. And then I want to get your response on the other side. So,
Cincinnati's FOP president Ken Kober says the union endorsed President Trump, but the pardons rubbed a lot of officers the wrong way.
Well, I mean, it certainly comes into question, in this day, does the president fully support the police? Biggest message from this is, are people going to think that it's okay now to assault law enforcement officers? And of course, we know that it's not.
In one case, a Harrison man allegedly swung an axe handle twice at a police officer who was trying to deploy pepper spray.
Using a deadly weapon, swinging it at someone, much less a police officer, that's someone that should still be incarcerated, and it's a shame that they're not. It just seems like it's, the police are always in the middle of some kind of political fight, and it's our job just to keep the community safe, and we just keep moving along, and tomorrow's a new day.
Kober says he's more sympathetic towards people who were charged with nonviolent offenses.
When we endorse people based off of who we think would be best for our organization. And sometimes they let us down. That doesn't mean that, he's not going to be supportive of us in the future.
Yeah, so I can't say I'm surprised at his tone, but he seems real soft on Trump to me on that one. Real soft. What do you think?
Actually, I was going to give him a little bit of credit, because I think at least he was willing to say what a lot of other Republican politicians seem to be twisting themselves up in knots to avoid saying, which is he was disappointed in what Donald Trump did by pardoning those who were violent against police officers. I mean, I thought his statement was, while he wasn't raging in anger over it, he essentially said, hey, I mean, if you read between the lines of what he was saying is, hey, here's a guy that we endorsed that basically did something that's going to rub a lot of law enforcement people the wrong way. That it was a disappointing, decision that he made. That's pretty much the crux of what I heard him say. Now, a lot of people would have probably have had him say that differently or say it more forcefully, but I think that's about as good as you're going to get from a Republican these days, as opposed to J.D. Vance, who was very stern in advance of the pardons, kind of saying the same thing, that these folks shouldn't be pardoned. And now he's trying to twist himself in the knots to say, well, the process wasn't right, trying to walk it back. Right. So let's at least, I get it may not be as strong as many people would have wanted, but at least let's give the guy the credit for at least having, the courage enough to say, hey, look, this was a disappointing thing that, I don't necessarily agree with, and a lot of police officers don't agree with, especially those who support it.
And
want to give him credit, huh? Interesting.
In this particular interview, I didn't see the channel, that one, but I saw that interview. But if you go to the very, very end of it, he says, we also are unhappy with Joe Biden for pardoning the officer, the person who shot or murdered somebody that were directly correlated with the Cincinnati Police Department. Joe Biden pardoned him in the midnight hour when he was pardoning all these other people. So he was saying, yeah, we're mad at Trump and we're mad at Biden. So let's get that there. But I do agree. I think that he could have said it a little bit harder, but I think that they're just, as police officers, they know that on the local level, or they're going to get the federal help when they need it, but they're a fraternity amongst themselves. So in my opinion, and just from my knowledge of knowing the police, they're a fraternity amongst themselves, no matter who the president is. They're going to be a fraternity amongst themselves.
Yeah. For me, I say keep that same energy. Like, if you're talking about, black and brown kids that's causing a ruckus and making people afraid down on Cincinnati Square, it just seemed like he had a whole bunch more swagger and bass and boom to his voice and a whole lot more emotion when it was that. But when we're talking about Donald Trump, yeah, he said what should have been said. It was wrong. He should have went a lot harder than that. So no, I don't give him any credit. I don't care about his political associations. For years and years and years, y'all have been putting in our heads that if you attack police, you are absolutely wrong. We're going to throw you under the bus. But as soon as Donald Trump and his boys do it, now everybody, what about it? Coulda, shoulda, woulda been. Oh, yeah, it was wrong, but we're going to look for ways to work together. You don't say that about these people on the other streets that do that. I don't see none of that there. So I'm saying keep the same energy, because pain is pain. Don't matter the cause. If an officer is injured, the officer is injured. But it's been real interesting to see how people tiptoe around this J6 thing. And it goes back to what I said. We're not that far. It don't take a whole lot to tip us into a really bad direction in this country, because you got people like Ken Kober that's going to soft pedal and soft talk about it instead of standing on business and saying, look, our officers' lives are more important to us than whether Donald Trump likes us or not.
Yeah, I don't disagree with anything that you said, Nathan, but, I think philosophically, this is where you and I always kind of tend to diverge. You talk about things as you wish they were or as they should be. I talk about them as they are. And so when I say I give the guy credit, I give him the credit within the framework of where we are, not where I think he should be or where I wish that he was. Given what we usually get from the police, from Republicans in general on issues like this. And you and I understand very clearly why he's not coming with the same steam. It's easy to come against steam. It's easy to come with steam against street kids who, what they gonna do? What are you gonna? There's little risk there politically or internally for him. One of the things I thought that was interesting in what he said is like, well, the police always seem to be like this political football, I think was what he said. Well, politics then. Quit endorsing candidates. If police are just here for the safety of the people and you don't want to be used as a political football, then get out of the political football,
Boom.
get out of the political game. Don't
I agree with
endorse
that point.
candidates. But as long as you're going to endorse candidates, then you're going to be interjected into the political argument, because through your endorsements, you're making a statement. Somebody in the comments said, well, you know, the FOP knew that, you know, Donald Trump has said he was going to free the J6, you know, prisoners before he got elected. And that was true. However, there was a little bit more equivocation in that gave people who wanted to support him a bit of an out. He said he was going to look at it at a case-by-case basis. He didn't do that. That was the first lie he told or promised that he broke, was that he was going to look at it on a case-by-case basis. He did a blanket pardon. So he lied or broke a promise on that. But many people use that as an out, because he even said that in his comments, like, well, you know, I could see the people who were nonviolent, you know, maybe letting them off. Like, that was always going to be those who supported him. That was always going to be their out. Well, the people who didn't really do anything, go ahead and pardon them, but the really violent ones, keep them in jail. They would have been good with that. And there would have been zero criticism of Trump had he done it that way. But the fact that he broke his promise and he did a wholesale pardon now puts them in a position, especially as a police officer, where you cannot say, he could not say entirely that he was okay with that. There was no way he could say that and not undermine every police officer in Cincinnati, in Hamilton County, and really across the country. So he had to sort of say he was disappointed or that he disagreed with it. And you know, not that I've seen, and maybe there's somebody out there who's endorsed that, but I think anybody in law enforcement who would endorse that can't do it without undermining what they're doing. And I haven't seen anybody who said that. That doesn't mean there's not some law enforcement fool out there that would say that, but I have not seen it as of yet.
Yeah, I agree with the part of what you said about not endorsing people. I think, you know, that's how you approach them with it, right? If you're media, like, well, wait a minute. How on one hand are you complaining about being caught up in the games, but you're playing a hand in the games? And I think, again, I haven't seen the entire interview, but, you know, I like to think that the reporter or the journalist or whoever pressed him more on, you know, why you made this decision and what this actually means. It sounds to me as if, yeah, he put up a little protest. It was super soft and weak. And he said just enough so we can go back to the lodge and say, I had to stand for my brothers, but not nearly far enough, as in what I say, to really protect him. Because what if he does it again? Right? He gonna soft pedal it again. Now, this is my thoughts about it. I could be completely wrong, but he's gonna soft pedal it again. And as a community member, I'm like, well, why is the energy change? Like I said, if it's black and brown kids down the square, you got all this, your chest is poked out. We got to do something, someone. But when it's officers, all of a sudden you want to back away. So what is really important to you? So it's a test of the man and his priorities and his values. And in situations like this, I believe, give people a chance to kind of see who is who.
Well, and I think you also got to realize who you're talking to. Like, here's the thing with Donald Trump. So here's the way that I kind of feel. Like, if I support you, if you my guy or you my woman, and if I see you doing something that's messed up, I'm gonna come at you with the real, and I'm gonna tell you, and I might even come at you in love, but I might even come at you a little bit aggressively because I care about you and wanting you to do the right thing. And if our relationship is right, I can talk to you that way. I can be real with you like that. Donald Trump, you can't be that, because Donald Trump only operates on one or two levels. You either love him, or if you criticize him, he's gonna burn you. He's gonna do that. So again, looking at things the way I understand them as the way they are, I get where even when people want to be critical of Donald Trump, they try to soft pedal the truth, because in many ways they want to stay in his good graces and the good graces of those who support him incessantly or regardless of what he does. And I've made this point a million times, that if our politics are going to improve, we got to be just as hard on the people that, if not harder, on the people that we support as those that we don't support, because the people that we support represent us. And if you step outside of how I think you ought to be representing me, and I've chosen you, then my criticism needs to be as sharp, if not more, of you, because I gave you my support. I gave you my trust. The other guy doing something that I don't like, I guess you could say, doesn't owe me any loyalty or doesn't necessarily owe me anything, although we're talking about being the president of the United States. So you ought to represent everybody, whether they voted for you or not. But I'm just speaking pragmatically and practically. Like, the person who I supported, who I gave my loyalty to, owes me more than the person I didn't. And so that's why I say, like, on both sides of the aisle, we need to make sure that when our individuals step out of line and they do stuff objectionably, that for their own good and ours, we need to be like, hey, this is not cool. This is not what we expect. This is not what we elected you to do, and you better get in line, or the next time you up, then I might have to look at somebody else.
And I agree with you. I agree with you, Kevin C. But now you're doing something that you kind of called me out for doing a little earlier, which is you're arguing for the way the way things should be, right? And I agree with you. But in the real world, most people ain't doing that. Most people are not going to be harder. If you're a Democrat, most people are not going to be harder on Democrats than they are Republicans. That's just the way things are. But it doesn't mean that you shouldn't stand on business, right? And do what you think is right. And it's the same thing with Ken Colbert. Like, this is just my opinion about what I think the right thing is to do, right? This is just my opinion. My opinion is that the members of FOP should take a stronger stance, right? And stand on it. Do you believe that officers' lives matter, or don't you? Period. And it shouldn't matter who is the perpetrator and what the context is, right? That's the way I think the way things should be. Now, realistically, I know things are way more political than that, but that's why I have to hold him to the standard that I believe he should be held to, right?
Can you think
individual. It doesn't mean he has to go for it. He could tell me, hey, go to you know what, Nate. But when we have a conversation about it, and I hope we'll have it soon, I'm going to reach out to Ken. I'm going to say the same thing. Like, bruh, you soft. Just like that, and he can take it any way he wants to, but that's just my opinion.
But
do you think
Trump,
there's 6 police officers who are not? Do you think there's police officers out there who sympathize with the January 6ers, or do you think that every police officer believes the way that you do? I mean, I'm asking subjective. Like, can you imagine?
Yes,
can you imagine?
I believe I would not be surprised that there's police officers that sympathize with the J6ers.
And they're probably about 50-50. So
I don't know any numbers about that, but
I would say,
I believe there's people out there. Yeah, probably. Yep.
So the police chief, in my opinion, he has to walk on both sides. He's got it because half of the people out there, half the people out there would have been out there if they could have been at January 6th. I believe some police officers would be in there.
I think there's a difference, though. I'm not going to say that. I'm not going to put that. I'm not going to go so far as to put that on the officers like that. I'm not going to say that there are not some rogue elements that we know exist in police departments who are not part of the protect and serve crowd in the way that we think about it, right? I don't know. I'm not going to go so far as to say that that's half of the police officers there. I want to say that probably 80 to 85% of most police officers would probably side with, because it's them. You just never know when you're going to find yourself. I'm sure there were a lot of Trump voters, a lot of Trump sympathizers who were on the front lines of the Capitol that day, who might have even voted for the man who, when those January 6 people came at them, they were calling them traitors and all sorts of other things. So I think if you do this job, regardless of where your political aspects are, you never know when you might find yourself the one being crushed behind a door, with hundreds of foaming at the mouth people trying to get at you. Those January 6 people wasn't asking those police officers for who they voted for, their credentials. They were coming for all of them. So I got to think that if you're in that job, most of those police officers probably recognize that they want to make it home to their families, and their families want to make it home. So just because somebody voted for Donald Trump and maybe supported him because they were in law enforcement, don't mean I think they're a part of that, not abiding by the rules of law or sympathize to the violent people who were there for January 6th. I won't go so far as to say that's half of police officers out there.
Yeah.
Can I?
Now,
What I heard him say though. I'm glad you
I
made
wanna-
that clarification,
and,
but that's
and I
not.
want to introduce
I
something
didn't
too.
take it that way. I thought he was just saying that
okay.
there's people out there. Yeah, I think it's possible that there's law enforcement out there that sympathize with Trump and maybe thought that, that there was some shenanigans with the vote, but at the same time they weren't down with the violence. I think
Okay.
there's people out
Right.
there.
Let me propose something to you guys. From the summer of 2020, leading up into the election of November 2020, we had Breonna Taylor, we had George Floyd, we had a lot of civil unrest, so to speak, and there was a lot of police officers called on the front line to combat that in Cincinnati and Louisville. Louisville went an extremely long time to where they were up against it was January 6th every day for a long time. You know what I'm saying? So the fact of the matter that it happened on that day, January 6th, where they did it, made it such a significant event of that day. But the whole summer, whole summer it went down. So police officers had to act different in different situations. So there's no way to isolate January 6th. As a collective thinker, there's no way to isolate January 6th if you don't say, okay, we've had a summer full of this going down, and it was all accepted for a cause of social justice. But then whenever that's a
false narrative, Tarris. You and a lot of Republicans like to traffic in this notion that during the George Floyd protests, those who burned, looted, destroyed storefronts didn't face any justice. That is the big. That is almost as big. Well, no, but you were intimating that because you said
I was not.
You said it went through without. I can't remember exactly what your phrase was, but you almost said that it kind of like there was a difference in
who
the
got
way
prosecuted
that the George Floyd protests would be for social justice. I think you were intimating there was a difference in the way that the two were treated.
Right.
And what I'm saying is basically now after these pardons, the people who participated in the George Floyd protests were punished infinitely, probably more harshly than even the January 6th people were. Maybe not in terms of quote unquote jail time and all of that, because I get it. Some people spend a couple years in jail. But when you're talking about having sentences commuted or being pardoned, I'm not aware of anyone in the George Floyd protests who were arrested that received any kind of pardon or leniency. All of those folks served jail time or whatever came across from them when they were arrested and charged. All of those people paid a penalty. We now cannot say the same for the January 6 people, that they did not serve out the fullness of their sentences.
My point was the tone of civil unrest when things weren't going your way was set. That was the tone. That was the tone by the Breonna Taylor and the George Floyd, the civil unrest in the streets. So the same thing happened with the January 6th. They didn't like something, so they got out of hand. But some would say subjectively that the civil unrest in Louisville, when they were pepper spraying and shooting stuff in rubber bullets, got out of hand. So I mean, that's what I'm trying to wrap my hand around, and I would like to get some understanding because for my own education, what makes January 6th so different than George Floyd, which was significant, and Breonna Taylor, which is significant? Is it just because the Democrats wanted to use it to weaponize things? Do you remember when Kamala Harris and Joe Biden on January 6th, I think it was 2021, got on there and was like, we need to make this day a day of remembrance. Never forget. It's going to be forgotten.
Let me answer that for you, Tarris. Let me tell you what the differences was. Is January 6th was a product of a lie, of a fabrication, of a lie about a stolen election that Donald Trump had zero evidence of, despite 60 court cases that showed that he literally had no standing or no foundation that the election was stolen. So one, it was based on a lie. The George Floyd protests were based on physical evidence, and of course, the later conviction of the officer involved that showed that there was a gross miscarriage of justice that we saw before our eyes. Plain and clear evidence, okay? One protest built on falsehoods and a lie. The other built on clear injustice with visual evidence that we saw in front of our faces.
Okay.
One was an attack on our government. One was the attack on the government in the attempt to stop the certification and the peaceful transfer of power. Now, here's the problem that I have with Republicans who want to make these false equivalencies and comparisons between the George Floyd protests and January 6th. If you think an attempt to stop the peaceful transfer of power is equivalent to people taking to the streets to protest government murder of a citizen, if you think those two things are comparable, then you are starting from a bad place. Now, that's not to say that any of the burning of the buildings or the looting or any of that stuff was excusable. Certainly it was not. In my personal opinion, I felt like that's where the George Floyd movement lost a little bit of its momentum, because you lost the higher ground and it allowed people on the right to begin to come in and shift the narrative toward that, where the entire country prior to that was like, oh yeah, this is bad. There ain't nothing that we can do to get around that. And the narrative was going in that direction. Mm-hmm. The looting and the violence that took place in the protests allowed those who wanted to come in and change the narrative to do just that. And they did. So I don't mistake what I'm saying about saying they're not comparable to saying that that activity was excusable. And again, there were arrests and people paid the price for that, but they're not the same.
The other
Phil, I want to hear Phil's.
Yeah,
I want to hear Phil. Phil been real quiet during this. I need to hear it.
Here's Phil's point of view. Or I should say, I'm making a request. I'm asking you, Nathan, to invite Officer Kober on this show. And I'll tell you exactly what.
Done. That was the plan anyway.
I'll tell you what I'm going to say to him. I'm going to say that if you didn't like what happened on January 6th, look in the mirror. Look in the mirror. You knew that Trump incited that violence in the first place. You know that he has been a lawbreaker. He stole secret documents. He put pressure on the Justice Department to overturn the election. He almost put his vice president's life in danger by blaming him in front of that crowd. He called the Secretary of State in Georgia and said, find me 11,000 votes. And he said that he was going to pardon those guys. So, and I'll say this to him, and I was always, by the way, the guy most supportive of the FOP when I was in office. What I would say to Officer Kober is, you're responsible. You had the opportunity when you endorsed to endorse someone who stood for law and order, and you endorsed a lawbreaker. So let's not have any crocodile tears about releasing these guys, because you knew it was going to happen. And I'd almost have more respect for him if he said, oh yeah, I think it's great that he released him. At least he'd be consistent.
You know what? I'm going to reach out to Mr. Kober this week and try to get him on the show. And I hope that we have that moment. I think your approach is even better, actually. You're right. He is responsible. You're absolutely right. And he
and all the other police FOPs that endorse
yes, they are.
All of them.
Absolutely, they're responsible. 100%. Or at least they need to be held accountable, held their feet to the fire on the decisions that they made. I'm sure he doesn't think he's responsible, but
can you see where the tone was set? But though the civil unrest that set the tone, if you see some people saying, "Oh, that's what they're doing," and then they set the tone of that's how you get things done, and then that tone was set for January 6th for Trump to make the speech, for the people to go their way. The tone was set for that. It happened.
Trump is 100% responsible. The people who rioted, and I, by the way, speaking of things I would support Trump, and I thought it was right to call attention to that violence and to say, I don't care whether it's a protest that has some basis in fact, violence is unacceptable. But with all due respect, Tarris, that wasn't what inspired the people who attacked those cops. It was Donald Trump who fed them, as Mitch McConnell said, fed them full of lies about the election. And that is what caused that. And I would also agree with Kevin's point that I am so tired of false equivalencies when it comes to Trump and his whole movement. With all due respect, I do think those guys who rioted and I don't know how long their sentences were, what happened, but those ones who rioted in Seattle, where they deserve to be punished full extent of the law. However, they were rioting, whatever you want to call it, against a particular issue that bothered them. Those guys in D.C. were in effect engaging in an attempt to overturn the election. They were engaging in a coup. That's what they were doing. And so, to me, there is no comparison between a bunch of folks that are rioting, committing acts of violence with people who are literally trying to overthrow the government of the United States.
That's a good point.
Agreed. I mean, I can't say I disagree with any of that. I think that, Tarris, when you were making a point like, oh, it was the riots, or not the riots, but it was a civil unrest. Nah, it was Trump. Trump spent about a year, a little bit more than a year, lying to people, setting the stage. If I lose, it's because they're going to steal it. Only way I can lose is if they steal it. And he riled people up, man.
Yeah.
He riled people up, and that's what led to it. And a lot of people got hurt. A lot of officers got hurt. Some got PTSD. I think there were complications that happened that day that led to some other officers, losing, not being with us now. Even though they didn't directly, die the day of directly to it. But, that's, that kind of mob, that kind of violence, those kind of moments, that's the kind of stuff you see on TV with real people, grown men, big old tall, tough, strong guys. Man, that can have an effect on you that you can never get over for the rest of your life. And we've seen that in what these officers are saying. So I think
so you're saying I'm completely off to saying that the tone wasn't set for civil discourse. If you don't like what you do, go to the streets and go march on it. And then whenever you're doing that,
that's the American way, though.
That's okay. So if the January
way,
Sixers, if the January Sixers who went to the Capitol would have never tried to impede in the Capitol, and they would just been out front, everything would have been that would have been
problem.
No problem.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go. Let's stay right here. Let's stay right here.
You have a right to protest. Yeah, if the J6ers had showed up and got loud and had a protest all day for weeks and weeks and months on end, but they never stormed the Capitol and caused violence, you got a right to do that. Go right ahead.
Okay, in the protest, as far as like Breonna Taylor, and as far as like the Department of Justice has said there has been known agitators that were paid to go to these places. You've seen video of people breaking windows, throwing stuff, getting the party started. The protest. You're always going to have that. So what? Let's not. So January 6th was you can't have that, right? You can have it at all the other places, but at January 6th, there weren't agitators there. There weren't people there to get the party started.
No. It was a day of love. That was a day of love.
But are you seeing where I'm going with this?
I'm seeing where you're going with this.
This is the exact argument that Republicans and conservatives are going to argue logically. When you say, oh yeah, it's okay for them during the civil unrest to go there, and you're allowed to protest. And most people at the protest, my sons and all that, were there after dark. When it was over, they left. That's whenever the start happened. That's when other people came in because of the Antigoners or something like that. And then they would break windows and start fires and do all the lawless, crazy looting stuff that was going on that turned the movement in a wrong way. What's not to say those same people were not at January 6th? And hold on, let me finish this last point, Nathan, and I won't say anything else about it.
No, go ahead, man. You got all the time you need, bro. Go ahead.
So when they can weaponize the Department of Justice, they can write the script. They can have Dana White, they can write the script. They got the Cash Patel writing the script saying, oh yeah, this Department of Justice, we found out these January 6ers that we left over. Oh yeah, the FBI had these people in there who were the ones who were, because there was FBI agents there, correct? What if they want to paint the picture and say, yeah, these FBI agents were there to further change history? By having the Capitol, having the inauguration inside of the rotunda was to change history. I get what you guys are saying, but these are the arguments they're going to say. They're going to say if Black Lives Matter, who was a left-wing organization that was bruised by George Soros and Act Blue PAC, and whose main objective was to break the nuclear family, and they did all that stuff, and they did all this stuff leading up to this election. They got the election, and then that was their get back. And then you're like, oh, well, y'all are paying us back for this. I'm not saying I have anything, like whenever y'all put me in the corner the other day about January 6th, I look into it way deeper than just this happened and this happened. Because I believe that if the riots from Breonna Taylor and George Floyd did not set the tone, that wouldn't have given the MAGA man the ability to call his boys on over there. And then with all that stuff going on in there, that's whenever the things went awry. Because on the other side, there's video evidence of Capitol Police opening the doors for people to allowed to go in and view the Capitol, while on the whole other side there was chaos going on. Yeah. So there's two different sides of the interest of the Capitol.
And that's what I will concede. Here's one thing I can concede, Tarris, and I'm learning this more and more just by listening to my MAGA friends and my Black Republican friends and just kind of seeing where you come from. Here's what I can concede. That, I think we've gotten to a space where some of these things, unfortunately, we're not going to be able to talk out because one side, speaking of politically, like one side has their set of facts and history and the way they look at things, and then the other side has their set of facts and history and the way they look at things. And I would say at least one side, your side, doesn't believe in independent sources for information. And so it doesn't really leave us any space to kind of work these things out in a way that, doesn't get out of hand, right? So for instance, what I would say to a lot of what you said about people being agitators, I think all those questions are fair questions. When I've heard conservatives say, well, were there agitators? Were there FBI agents? I'm a Black man. I know what they've done to our community. So that's a fair question. So then secondly, I'm looking for the information, right? It's all about what you accept as information. Like for me, when information came out during the Biden administration and it absolved or gave us a correct picture or a picture to look at, I took that as fact. For you, what I'm getting and what I concede is you and people on the right, you don't trust the government unless your guy is in the White House, right?
I don't trust him, period.
Right. And I understand that because I don't trust Trump. So I think we're at a stalemate on some levels, man, in this country. And I just fear that we have gotten to a place where we just can't talk things out. Because you know what the next move is. If we can't talk it out, it's the other thing. And I don't want to see this country go down that road. But that's what it looks like. If we can't agree that the earth is round, then we can't explore the universe together, right? Right. And that's where we are now. And it's a very unfortunate place. One of the J6ers who was recently pardoned by Donald Trump was shot and killed by an Indiana sheriff deputy because he was quote unquote while resisting arrest. Did you guys hear about this?
I heard something about it. I didn't see it.
You heard something about it. Yeah, this guy was pardoned, got into a shootout with police or got into an altercation with police.
And the police shot him?
They shot and killed him within a week of being pardoned. Let me put the screen up here for you so people can check it out. There's another J6er that has been rearrested because apparently and allegedly he was trying to solicit a minor. And I'm like, you know what it seems like to me? It seems like the Justice Department got it right with some of these individuals. They should have been in jail instead of being out here on the streets. And it's just so ironic to me that while Donald Trump has successfully scared people about so-called migrant crime, he goes and releases criminals back onto the streets to put us all in danger.
Nathan, I think another aspect of this, which I think has been overlooked, of these pardons, is that think about the fact that this investigation of January 6th was the largest police investigation in the history of the FBI, and I would say probably in all of history. And the truth of the matter is, it was handled magnificently. Think what they had to do. They had to go through hours and hours of video clips and manage to find, through tips and other means, the people who perpetrated this. And this was years and years of work by prosecutors and by the FBI. Now think about it from their perspective. How do you think those FBI agents and those prosecutors who spent years putting these cases together and then an amazing amount of work to get them convicted either by plea or trial. Or think about that. You talk about a slap in the face. What a slap. I can tell you that there were some cases when I was a prosecutor I did work a couple of years on. And if some guy, after I did all that work and convicted a guy who was a violent or dangerous offender, if somebody somehow said, oh, here, you can get out of jail free, I tell you, I would have been pissed. And the message that went to all those FBI and prosecutors was your work meant nothing.
Yeah. And political violence is okay as long as you're doing it for one side or the other. So, yeah, welcome back to the conversation. We were talking about a man who was fatally shot by Indiana sheriff deputies. I don't know all the details, but got into an altercation. This is within a week of being pardoned by Donald Trump.
Mhm.
There's another man who's been rearrested on charges of solicitation of a minor. So again, I just made the point. It seems as if these judges got it right. There's been a lot of conversation about them being unfair, but so far, at least in these two examples, it looks like these are the kind of people that should have been behind bars, and not a threat to the rest of us out here.
Well, I guess as some people might say, you can't escape karma. Donald Trump might be able to, pardon you, but people kind of are who they are, and they will find themselves eventually back in the crosshairs of law enforcement again. Let's just hope that's not at the expense of some innocent individual, or even at the expense of the life of someone in law enforcement who has to apprehend some of these people. I mean, I think it just again further goes to highlight Donald Trump's selfishness and recklessness, because again, this is all about here's what I would say is
don't like that.
is pardoning the January 6th people is more about Donald Trump exonerating himself than them. Well, here's the thing that you got to recognize about Donald Trump, that everything that he does is self-serving. It's all about him. So the fact that these people got off scot-free is sort of a byproduct of his own need to satisfy himself and continue this delusion that he was, falsely prosecuted, that he did not send these people down here to incite and all of that kind of stuff. So essentially, when he was pardoning them, I think on some level he was really pardoning himself, and that's the great tragedy. Yeah, I mean that's the great tragedy for our country, is that Donald Trump posits a lot of the actions that he does as being for the people, but it's all but if you dig beneath the surface, it really in all of it, it's all about him and his own self-aggrandizement, or his own absolving himself of his own sins. And unfortunately, we're going to rue the day when we read a story about one of these January 6 people who goes out and does something really terrible. And I hope I'm wrong about this, but does something really terrible to an individual or in a community that we're going to look back on and be like, what the hell was this guy doing out? Or woman.
Yeah, I agree. I hope that does not happen 100%. Yeah. I agree 1,000%. I hope it does not happen. But the politicization is real. And that Donald Trump was in a press conference and they were asking him a question about the J6ers, and they were running down like the individual sort of backstory. And he just looked like, huh? What? But to your point, it was never about them. It was 100% about him. It was never about them. It was about, rewriting history and making himself look good, and making himself feel, and also coming through with a campaign promise, which again is more self-aggrandizement, but we are where we are. We are where we are. Let me play this for you. This is JD Vance. We've been talking about the J6ers. We've already into the conversation, but I'll play it just so people can understand what we're talking about here. Give me 1 second. Where is it here?
Nathan, is this his before the pardons interview, or after the pardons interview?
This is after the pardons interview, so before the pardons, he was adamant that Donald Trump it's going to be a meticulous cut. It will not be a blanket pardon, and violent offenders should not apply. And then this is afterward. Let me see if I can pull this up quickly.
Seconds causing a concussion. If you stand with law enforcement, how can you call these people unjustly imprisoned?
Margaret, you're separating. There's an important issue here. There's what the people actually did on January the 6th, and we're not saying that everybody did everything perfectly. And then what did Merrick Garland's Department of Justice do in unjustly prosecuting well over 1,000 Americans in a way that was politically
Is
motivated?
violence like that against a police officer ever justified?
Violence against a police officer is not justified, but that doesn't mean that you should have Merrick Garland's weaponized Department of Justice expose you to incredibly unfair process.
Used an electroshock weapon against a policeman who was dragged out of the defensive line by plunging it into the officer's neck. He was imprisoned, sentenced to 12 years, 7 months. He got a pardon. Ronald Maccabee hit a cop while wearing reinforced brass knuckle gloves, and he held one down on the ground as other rioters assailed the officer for over 20 seconds, causing a concussion. If you stand with law enforcement, how can you call these people unjustly imprisoned?
Margaret, you're separating, there's an important issue here. There's what the people actually did on January the 6th, and we're not saying that everybody did everything perfectly.
So there it is. You get a gist of a little bit of what he said in that interview. And he's classic walking it back, and he wants to parse his words and, hey, look at it this way. He wants to reframe the conversation. It's not about what they actually did. It's about what they were prosecuted for, right? But this is where we are. And when is JD going to understand? Don't open your mouth until Daddy Trump tells you to speak. This is like the second or third time he's done this, where he got out ahead of Daddy Trump, and Daddy Trump had to.
He made the mistake of telling the truth.
Phil's exactly on point. Like, this is what happens to anybody in Donald Trump's orbit who actually tries to make sense. Like, when you actually try to make sense, Donald Trump will always make you have to backtrack in order to cover for him. He's the president pretzel maker, because it's funny to watch these guys try to twist themselves in knots to back up what they said, to Phil's point, that was actually true and actually made some degree of common sense, to then have to try to bend yourself and contort yourself to try to make sense out of something that is senseless. And, you know, it doesn't surprise me about JD Vance, because if there's one thing that you know about JD Vance, he is the flip-flopper in chief. I mean, this is the guy who once referred to Donald Trump as Hitler, as America's, what do you call him, opium or some type of drug or something like that he referred to Donald Trump. Once again, telling the truth, everything that everybody could see, stuff that made common sense. But then when it became politically expedient for him, he embraced Donald Trump and all of the madness, and has been, bending over backwards trying to make Donald Trump seem palatable. And so this is just par for the course for flip-flop Vance. I'm gonna come up with something else that JD stands for. Give me a little minute to think on that, but I'm gonna come up with something, an acronym for JD that applies to who he is.
JD just he did what you guys said. He just pivoted. He pivoted to the DOJ. He pivoted to Merrick Garland and the DOJ. It's the whole. You're gonna hear. You just heard it from JD. Yeah, you call him whatever you want. You just heard it from the next president. He's on course. Yeah, that happened. But Department of Justice and Merrick Garland did this, so that's why we are going to be able to do the same thing. He said it. Everything we've been talking about. JD Vance just repeated it. Merrick Garland did it, so they were unjustly prosecuted. I've heard these January 6ers, they've got this like GoFundMe account that's well funded, like, because they're talking about here's their narrative. Yeah, we were improperly charged and put and detained. We lost our wives, we lost our mortgages, we lost our cars, our businesses. We have no money to stand on because we've been sitting in jail unjustly prosecuted by the DOJ. That's their narrative. I know the logical narrative and what we're talking about is one thing, but for the millionth time, let's take logic out of this and let's start talking about narratives that people are pushing. And JD Vance pivoted straight to the Merrick Garland and the Department of Justice weaponized their position against Donald Trump and, like Kevin said, against Donald Trump. Donald Trump and his grandiose narcissist, whatever we got about 80 more days of this bull crap left. And to answer this question, man, I don't know, man. I don't eat bacon unless it's turkey bacon. So I mean, like that's a swine, it's a bird flu thing. That's not a political thing.
Oh,
It's a
no. Bird flu. What's that? Nah, Trump is in office. He should be able to make the gas prices and the egg prices go down, right? I didn't hear all these parsing and equivocations and breaking it down scientifically when Biden was in office. He was the president. He was responsible. So Trump is the president. He is responsible for egg prices, which the type of eggs I eat, they're not even at the grocery store. So we'll see what
Can
happens.
am I whenever I'm saying that about the Department of Justice and how they're going to pivot, am I making sense or am I just talking in circles?
No, you explain the game. Yeah, you're right.
Okay,
That's
okay.
exactly
Because in the chat,
game
thing,
you played.
I'm like talking a whole nother language, but I'm just like telling you I'm telling you the Republican play, so it's not surprising when it happens. Because it's not going to be surprising when the George Floyd. That's after all, I'd say probably about 45, 50 days from now, whenever cash gets proved, gets confirmed, they're going for George Floyd narrative.
Yeah. So Tarris is kind of hitting on what I was talking about earlier. Is JD Vance is using the buzzwords DOJ? That's the boogeyman. All some people who have drunk the Trump Kool-Aid have to hear is DOJ, and then it doesn't matter what comes after that, right? Like you can spout as much truth and facts as you want, but for those folks, when he said the words Merrick Garland and DOJ, for those Fox News watchers and the MAGA crowd and all of those hardcore GOP Trump folks, like it doesn't matter what facts that the left you ain't even got to be the left objectively present. If you say Merrick Garland and DOJ, there's nothing that you could say that can run counter to the narrative that's already been created that they will believe.
That goes all the way back to Hunter Biden's laptop.
Right. But you should still put up that fight, though. You're right. Right. I definitely concede that. And that's why MAGA and this whole thing is real interesting. But that's all I got, everybody. Does anybody have anything that maybe we didn't get a chance to, circle back to, or something that you heard or speak
I have a question. I have a question I'd like to present to you guys. Something I'm trying to mill over within myself, because I mentioned me going to the NAACP Martin Luther King Jr. dinner in Newport, Kentucky, and when I was there, there was a particular speaker who was an elected official, and as a black elected official, having to sit and watch a white elected official speak at a place, and I'm trying to use my words correctly. I felt a certain type of way, like why wouldn't the black elected official be there to speak at a situation like at an NAACP luncheon? And I know they say it's nonpartisan, but it's hard for me not to believe that there could be some, or is it chapter specific, or how should I address that feeling? Like if I'm sitting there and I'm a black elected official and I work just as hard as this guy, just as hard, what would put this man above someone who, what process goes through to decide who's going to be speaking at these events, and why isn't it meticulous enough to say, okay, if this guy is, because I'm a black Republican, a black Republican, I get to go, I sit down, but I'm gonna put this white Democrat up so they can talk and talk about how humbled they are to be speaking in such a statue place. Not a proud black man be like, I worked hard. This is Martin Luther King's dream, and I get to speak up here as a constituent and elected official in Northern Kentucky. So I'm trying to mill my way through that to understand that part of, this is an NAACP and it's supposed to be for the national advancement of colored people. Is it only a national advancement of colored people if you're a Democrat? Or can we go back to W.E.B. Du Bois? That's what I'm asking.
If you're looking for a little bit of advice without having any particulars, here would be my advice. I would say, as in most things comes down to relationships, about who you know, the type of relationships you have. So if it were me, I would be less focused about who else is speaking, and I would just focus more on building your own relationships with that chapter and whoever it may be. What they're doing with somebody else really has no impact on you, have no connection with it. But I think that would probably, if you are genuinely trying to have connections, well, then make genuine connections with this organization. I think you're talking about the Northern Kentucky NAACP. Yeah, I would just try to have authentic,
great people. I love them.
Just cultivate good relationships, good authentic relationships with them. That's it. That's all I would ever say.
Yeah, I think that's good advice,
But
Nathan. The late Joe Madison, who was the Black Eagle, who used to be in radio for a number of years, he used to have a saying that he would repeat regularly on his show. He would say, "There are no permanent friends or enemies, only permanent interests." And I think that one of the things that one of the mistakes that politicians on both sides of the aisle make is, if you want to foster relationships with any organizations, find out what your mutual interests are and begin to work there. One of the things that you're not going to do is probably come into any organization and change their mission or their philosophy or their thought to bring them around to where you might be politically. But I'm pretty sure that if you examine the things that are important to you and the things that are important to the organization, there's probably some mutual areas of interest that both of you can get behind, whether you're Republican or Democrat. And I think that's where politicians could learn to work more better within organizations or within communities, instead of trying to come in and change them or lead them to your particular political point of view, whether that's left or right. Is where are our common interests, to where even if we are not where we are what might be considered to be adversaries, we can find, some common ground. So I think, that was wise advice. There are no permanent friends or enemies, only permanent interests. I think perhaps if we could learn to work in the areas where we do find agreement, we get a lot more done. So that might.
And you both are correct. You both are correct, and you made a birth, and you're right. It's all about relationships. I know how the whole thing went about is because the person had a great relationship with the previous person who was elected, and is a great advocate for the city. And I didn't expect to. I just want to know how to build the relationship going forward. That's why I asked the question. You both gave me great advice to build a relationship with the organization and to align and to find out what our common interests are. But after those things are done, after those 2 points that you both made are done, and then it comes down to partisan politics, I'm going to ask you guys again when I get to the point where I've fostered the relationship with the NAACP. I'm going to just speak frankly. I foster a relationship that I should to with the NAACP, put in the work just as much or more than the person who was speaking. And let's say me and this person who was speaking happen to meet each other up in an election. And there's another luncheon. Who are they going to choose to speak? Who would they choose? Where would they align themselves then? Where they find, okay, I'm going to align myself with the white liberal who I have more who aligns more with this, or the black Republican who has more in line with this. How would that decision even be made?
We don't know. But again, I think my advice would be focus on relationships, and to Kevin's point, focus on where you agree, right? And so if you're focusing on that, what you just hypothesized should never happen, right? Because you're focusing on where you agree, not where you disagree. That's it. That's all you can ask for.
What about the relationships that have been fostered beforehand that I can't compete with that if they've
none of your business.
That's a good point. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. That's
right. The
why
only
I brought
thing that
that
matters
up.
is your relationship and where you align. That's the only thing that matters. Not where you don't align, where you align. That's the guiding ship. That's the North Star.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think
that's great advice, guys. I appreciate that.
And I think in some areas, there's a book by a guy named Jim Collins called Good to Great. And one of the points that he makes that stops a lot of things from achieving greatness is concern about credit or recognition. I think at some level, it's got to be about the work. It's got to be about the progress, and less about whether who's speaking before me or who's speaking. Because if it becomes about me getting my flowers or the recognition that I feel like I deserve over somebody else, like that's going to always pollute the conversation and corrupt things. And I think that in any successful endeavor, the work has to be primary. And if you happen to get the credit or the flowers that's due to you, that's icing on the cake. But that can't be the cost of admission for your participation, is I have to get this type of credit, or I have to be recognized in this type of way for the work. Look, I get it. We all want that. We all want to get. But if that is your price of admission at the end, that's always going to be the thing that destroys the progress, or a lot of good things have
Yeah,
fallen
Kev.
apart and haven't been made to work, when people's egos get in it and they feel like they're not getting what they should be getting out of it. If that's your price of admission, then you're probably best not even getting yourself involved.
That's not my point, and that's not my thing even to bring it up because of wanting recognition. Because I mean, I'll give you an example. Like at 13, when Cameron Means was 13 years old, and I never bring this up, but I feel like I needed to do this on this program. When he was 13 years old, I'd pick him up from West High, take him to the studio, and teach him what it's like to be an entrepreneur. I was the first person who showed him what it's like to be an entrepreneur. Now he owns Black Owned, and I don't say nothing about that. And this is when he was 13. There's several young men that I've built into, and I don't want any credit. I'm saying, could this be used as a political weapon in the future? If both parties know, say me and this guy are running for the same position, and they give him a chance to speak in front of 500 people, and I'm sitting out there watching him speak, that could be weaponized. And that's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about the morality. I'm not talking about what you should be doing. I'm not talking about getting in there and doing the work, because you guys know I'll do that. I'm talking about when it comes down to them hard decisions, but your relationship that you already have in the past with a particular party, and then you got to make that hard decision. I'm anxious to see which way that party goes, because I know there's other organizations out there that say they're nonpartisan, that lean heavily to a certain party. So I just want to, that's why I brought that up, because I'm going to keep addressing this until because I trust you guys enough to walk through this and say, this is what I experienced, because I didn't like what I experienced before. But maybe I'm going to foster a relationship. I'm going to follow up, do exactly what I should be doing. But if then it still comes down to relationships and partisan organizational alliances, then I'm going to speak out on it.
All right, guys. That's all we got. I appreciate your time.
Hey, before we do, there was one thing I was going to mention before we got into that.
Sure.
And I think it's interesting. I don't know, and I am lobbing this grenade into the argument, admittingly, without having a ton of information about the answer to my question. But I do think it's interesting, because it does bring it a little bit closer to home, is that one of the president's executive orders was to pause funding for the infrastructure bill, that the bipartisan infrastructure bill that Joe Biden passed when he was president. And obviously, we know that a big part of that infrastructure bill was money that was going to come to the Brent Spence Bridge replacement project here in Cincinnati and northern Kentucky. So I think there are still people who are trying to suss through and parse out like what exactly putting a pause on that funding might mean. It may not mean all projects, but it could mean it could impact the project here on the Brent Spence Bridge. So
they've already said it's not going to.
They said that.
Bashir's
Okay,
already said
admittedly, if that's true, then I missed
that.
I missed that update on that, and so I will defer to what Tarris is saying here, that has been resolved, and they're saying that it won't impact. But I will say, though, as you look at, that's why it's important to look at these executive orders that the president is passing, because I don't know which projects that is going to impact, but it could have very well. It won't. Tarris is saying it won't, but it could very well have impacted ours as well. And the question would have been for folks around here who voted for Donald Trump, who know how badly we need that bridge replacement. How would they have felt about that at that point? With him passing that. And so, of course, it's not Brent Spence Bridge here, but it's somebody's Brent Spence Bridge somewhere, or some infrastructure project somewhere,
or somebody's
going to.
Head Start program.
Somebody was counting on and anticipating that they're probably not going to get now. And is that what you voted for? So that's why I say it's important to not just focus on the Gulf of America things, but some of these things that Donald Trump is doing that actually has impact on people that may not be what they voted for. Yeah, you might have voted for mass deportations, but I bet you didn't vote to not have a bridge project go through that you're counting on.
Yeah. All right, guys. Thank you so much.
Do we get to have a final comment?
Yeah. Go right ahead,
Barbarian.
Go right ahead.
I have to make a confession, and it's very difficult for me to do this, but I'm going to do it. And here it is. Kevin Aldridge was right. Now, it's difficult for me to say this, but I have actually been mulling over the last few weeks something our distinguished colleague said a couple weeks ago, and he said about these comments that, oh, this is not who we are, meaning this country is not who we are, meaning things Trump's doing. And he said, this is who we are. And I've been thinking about this, and I have to say that was a very profound and a true comment. And I've had other people say that to me in a different way also, whether it is out of being uninformed or misinformed or simply selfishness. Kevin was right. I mean, this is a reflection of who we are, and that's a hard thing to grasp and admit to. But I think he's right.
Okay. All right.
I'll even take it a step further, Phil. I think it's a reflection of who we've always been. I think that what technology has done, what technology has afforded us, is the opportunity to see inside the hearts and minds of our neighbors in ways that we previously could not. And that has been the most revealing thing, is that as we become more technologically advanced, more things that were sort of hidden beneath the surface that we couldn't see or that we didn't hear about are coming to the forefront now. We're having to confront these things. The issue, body cameras for police have changed the conversation about policing. Cell phone cameras have changed the essence of the conversation about policing, because there were conversations going on for years in the Black community about some of the things that were going on in relation to how communities were being policed, but nobody believed it because there was no visual evidence, or there were only the words of a handful of people that could be dismissed out of hand, mainly because their voices weren't loud enough. Now what you're seeing is, with the advent of body cameras and social media and a whole bunch of other things, a lot more stuff is coming out, and people are surprised. And I've written this many times, I've said this many times, is that what we're seeing as a result of technology and social media is an uncovering of things that have always been there, but many people were oblivious to, ignorant to, or blind to, because they had the luxury of not having it in their face. That is no longer the case. And so what we are seeing now is what's always been beneath the surface. And this is what we're wrestling with. And now what you have is, a lot of people want to blame Donald Trump for this. And I think I've written this too, that Donald Trump might have control over his own social media, but he don't have control over yours. So whatever you do, that's coming from you. That's coming from you. If somebody can say anything to me that elicits something out, that means that was already inside of me. I was already thinking this way or feeling this way. You just hit the button or gave me the empowerment to say what was already on my heart and in my mind. I mean, look, even when we get heated, we may say a lot of things that we regret in the heat of the argument, but you can't say you didn't mean it, because a lot of times that stuff, maybe you didn't mean for the damage and the hurt, but certainly what you said was what you felt. And it came out at a moment where you allowed your defense mechanism that normally governs how we speak. You let that down because somebody pushed that button and you just said it. But that you can't say that ain't what you meant, because that comes from, I think that comes from a very instinctual, reflective place that we don't like to admit, that's a part of who we are and sometimes, unfortunately, how we think. Donald Trump he's the button pusher. He pushes that button that's allowing people to release what's already in their hearts and minds, what they think. He's given them, as we said, permission to be who they are. And that is the most difficult thing to reconcile, because we like to think we're better than that, So I think Donald Trump, for all of the things that I dislike about him and who he is, I think he's a convenient scapegoat for people and their views and opinions that they now let out. Because part of what they like about Donald Trump is he says things that they want to say, but because of their job, because of their situation, they can't really say it. So Donald Trump says it for them and they cheer that on. But you best believe that they agree with it.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt about that.
I want to say to you guys, I appreciate you guys too for being who you guys are, being able to talk to you guys the way that I want to talk to you guys and without any name calling and disparaging. And I think it's great to see intelligent people having conversations like this, because people stop me all the time like, who those guys you talking to? Oh man, they give you the, but I believe it's very necessary to see grown men having conversations completely on different spectrums without name calling and saying disparaging things. And I got utmost respect for you guys for that.
Same. Hey, listen, everybody, thank you for your time. For the listeners, thank you for being here. We're planning to be back on Friday at 1 p.m. So tap into us and enjoy the show. All right, guys, have a great day.
Thanks. Thank you.